quick goodbyes, and then a race to the Sarasota airport. At that moment, in the White House,
I was in my West Wing office.
The Secret Service had come in to his office. I think it was 2 or 3 agents, which is very unusual.
David Borer is another White House photographer, assigned to Vice President Dick Cheney.
And agents came inside the office and said, sir, you have to come with us.
Put his hand on the back of my belt, grabbed me by a shoulder, and sort of propelled me down the hallway.
And to an underground bunker, the President's Emergency Operations Center, PEOC they call it.
It's got blast doors on each end. There's a secure phone there as well as a television set.
Up above, National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice is trying to find the rest of the President's team. Secretary of State Colin Powell is in Peru. Attorney General John Ashcroft is in the air. And Federal Emergency Management Agency Director Joe Albaugh is at a conference in Montana.
As I was trying to find all of the principals, the Secret Service came and said, you have to leave now for the bunker. The Vice President's already there. There may be a plane headed for the White House. There are a lot of planes that are in the air that are not responding properly.
In the bunker, the Vice President is joined by Rice and Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta.
Someone came in and said, Mr. Vice President, there's a plane out 50 miles.
Mineta confers with Federal Aviation Deputy Chief Monty Belger.
And so I said, Monty, what do you have? He said, well, we're watching this target on the radar, but the transponder's been turned off, so we have no identification.
At the FAA's Air Traffic Control Center near Washington's Dulles Airport, Danielle O'Brien is at a radar scope.
It was an unidentified plane to the southwest of Dulles, moving at a very high rate of speed.
Someone came in and said, Mr. Vice President, airplane's 30 miles out.
We caught on the radar scope a few blips, maybe 7 or 8, just enough to kind of go around in a half circle and then fade right over, losing radar contact right over Washington. I said, my God, what is that?
He was fast, and it would be unprecedented for a commercial plane to come screaming through your airspace at that kind of speed, unidentified, without making some type of communication.
We knew that he was headed in that direction, and we were calling Washington Center. Oh my God, he's coming towards you.
The fellow came in and said it's 10 miles out, assuming that it was coming into National Airport, Ronald Reagan National Airport.
At Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, F-16 fighter pilots Brad Derrick and Dean Ekman scramble into the air. They are 105 miles, 12 minutes south of Washington. It is just 9:30 a.m.
We're directed to go in which turned out to be Reagan National, which is right by the Pentagon.
Our supervisor picked up our line to the White House and started relaying to them the information. We have an unidentified, very fast-moving aircraft inbound toward your vicinity, 8 miles west, 7 miles west, and it went 6, 5, 4.
And he said, uh-oh, we just lost the bogey, meaning the target went off the screen. So I said, well, where is it? And he said, well, we're not really sure.
I happened to look up to my left, and there is the airplane. The airplane is about 25 feet above the ground, and it's about 150 to 200 yards away and coming at us.
It is 9:38. Just 52 minutes have passed since the first attack. Firefighter Alan Wallace is on duty next to the helicopter landing pad on the west side of the Pentagon.
I look up and see the airplane. I hear the noise from the airplane, and bang, the airplane hits the building. And that's how fast it happened.
The whole building jumped.
Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld is on the 4th floor of the Pentagon, around the corner from the impact.
The table shook and the building shook, and it felt like a bomb had hit the building.
Plus 352.
I think we just had an airplane crash east of here. It must be in the district area.
White House Claire Shipman is on the phone. Claire, what's that we're looking at?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out right now.
I'm direct, and there is visible smoke coming from that area. High visible smoke.
Any unit responding to check the area of the Pentagon, advise on channel 1.
American Airlines plane headed east down over the pike.
The Pentagon, a plane has crashed into the Pentagon.
I don't believe I was knocked down, but I did at a certain point when I thought I was on fire. I thought I had ran as far as I should run, and then I hit the ground.
I went downstairs and went outside and around the corner, and of course there it was.
Everything around the fire truck and the fire station, including the blacktop that surrounds the fire truck, was on fire. There were trees along the side of the Pentagon that the leaves were on fire.
There was metal all over the grass, and there were people coming out of the building hurt, and people were assisting them.
Almost directly behind the fire truck, but there are people trying to get out of the building, and there is someone back there who is trying to help them.
Other firefighters from nearby Fort Myer and Arlington, Virginia, joined the rescue efforts.
From the time we first assembled there, I would say 30 seconds later, there were probably 30 people there. And 30 seconds after that, there were probably 100 people there.
Among those helping the wounded and injured is the 69-year-old Rumsfeld himself.
There was a young woman, bleeding, sitting on the ground, and I think she said to me, she didn't know who I was, she said she could see people holding drips going into people, IV of some kind, and she said something to the effect, if someone could bring that person over, I could hold it.
The Secretary of Defense is outside the burning building, while inside the Pentagon,
for 30 minutes, we couldn't find him. And just as we began to worry, he walked into the door of the National Military Command Center.
Very, very quickly, he's in there in his shirt sleeves, as I recall.
On 9/11, General Richard Myers steps in as acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
It was, from my viewpoint, a very professional scene. There was no panic, no undue alarm.
High overhead, jet fighters arrive, just moments too late.
We get in closer and I can start to see smoke coming up. I looked down and started seeing the landmarks, and that was obviously the Pentagon was on fire. You know, looking down and actually seeing the Pentagon burning, and you know, big black billowing smoke out of it. Just looking back, and I'm thinking, we're at war.
In the Pentagon Command Center, General Winfield is juggling a secret conference call.
We added the White House, and we added Air Force One to the conference. All of the governmental agencies that were involved in any activity that was going on in the United States at that point were in that conference.
Rumsfeld orders U.S. forces to DEFCON 3, the highest alert for the nuclear arsenal in 30 years.
The smoke got intense at one point. I actually recommended the Secretary, you know, maybe we ought to think about an alternate location.
They wanted to evacuate us in the building, and I decided I'd prefer to stay.
Instead, Rumsfeld sends his deputy, Paul Wolfowitz, to a secret remote bunker where there is a duplicate of the Pentagon's command and control system.
We flew them out by helicopter to Site R. The deputy SecDef flew out there, and he was in charge of our alternate site.
Just moments earlier on Capitol Hill, to testify before Senator Edward Kennedy's Education Committee, the First Lady learns about the New York attacks.
Our hearts and our prayers go out to the victims of this act of terrorism, and that our support goes to the rescue workers.
We had walked down the corridor, and just as we were about to get in the elevators, the Secret Service said, is there someplace we can go right away? And we heard that the Pentagon had been struck.
The Pentagon crash literally reverberates in congressional corridors. In under an hour, 3 hijacked planes have struck buildings in New York City and Washington. Police warn the leaders of Congress the Capitol building could be next.
Well, they said, we think there's a plane heading for the Capitol.
Some Capitol policemen broke into the room and said, we're under attack. I've got to take you out right away.
As I looked up, hung up the phone and looked back down the window, out my window and down the mall, this huge cloud of rolling black-blue smoke was coming across.
When I looked out that window of my office, and I could see the smoke billowing up from the Pentagon, and my immediate impression, you know, we're fixing to be hit too, and let's get out of here.
People were just as fearful as I've seen. I saw looks in senators' faces, looks in staff faces that I've never seen before.
Get off the sidewalk.
Workers, tourists, senators scattered as word spreads of another hijacked plane.
The plane is heading for the Capitol.
The Senate chaplain offers a prayer.
So, Lord, be with us. Moving everybody back. Moving everybody back.
I'm thinking to myself, here I am, Speaker of the House, something I never dreamed would ever happen to me. And we're evacuating the Capitol. It just can't be happening to us.
Speaker of the House Dennis Hastert is third in line of succession to the presidency.
I was put in one of our secure automobiles, and the next thing I knew, I was hurtling through the back streets of Washington.
The other leaders jam into a room 2 blocks from the Capitol.
We were in a vulnerable position. We were all in one place, and I started asking, you know, who's in charge here?
We were like everybody else. We were in complete chaos.
I think it might be a good idea if we got out of this crowd situation.
Hey, John, Boyd. Some leaders rushed to the west front of the Capitol, where military helicopters await.
Then we flew over the Pentagon, and we saw the remnants of an airplane into the side of the Pentagon with this whole facade caved in with black smoke and thousands of people gathered around. It was a terrible sight.
While in Florida, the president hurries aboard Air Force One.
He was virtually shoved on board the plane. The rest of us being forced to move faster, faster, faster to get on board.
The president sat down in his chair, motioned to the chair across from his desk for me to sit down, and before we could both of us sit down and put on our seatbelts, they were rolling the plane. And they stood that 747 on its tail and got it to about 45,000 feet, but as quick as I think you can get a big thing like that up in the air.
It is 9:55 a.m.
It seemed we were wheels up in nanoseconds.
Ellen Eckert is a White House stenographer.
The chatter in the press section of the plane where I was sitting was, where are we going, and we were looking out the windows trying to see if we could figure out geographically where we were going.
That's what the president is trying to decide up front.
I was focused on getting the president in a safe environment, which meant on the plane, and the plane should be in the air. And then it came a question as where should the plane go?
He said, I'm coming back. And I said, you may not want to do that, Mr. President, because Washington's under attack. We don't know where the next attack is coming.
Press Secretary Ari Fleischer is keeping notes.
Turned to the head of the Secret Service detail and he said, I want to go back home ASAP. I don't want whoever is doing this to hold me outside of Washington. And the head of the Secret Service detail said to him, our people are saying it's too unsteady still.
There was a little bit of pulling and pushing with him to suggest that we should fly to a secure location and where we could have good communication and then make a decision when he should return to Washington.
When I got to the bunker, the president was talking to the vice president on the phone, and the vice president was saying the same thing. You can't come back here.
At that point, urged him not to return to Washington because it was clear then that an attack included Washington as well.
So it was on the basis of that third plane that you said at that point to the president, you can't come back here.
Right, we don't know what's happening.
On board Air Force One, we seemed to be flying forever, and one of the Secret Service agents leaned over to me and said, look down there. We're at 44,000 feet, and we're not going back to Washington.
Deep beneath the White House, Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta issues an unprecedented order.
Their planes are coming into the eastern seaboard, turn them around and get them going west. If they're going west, have them land at their destination, but in any event, if they're not too far away, have them land.
More than 4,000 planes are in the skies over the U.S. FAA policy allows pilots to use their own discretion to decide where and when they land in an emergency. But on this morning,
I said, screw pilot discretion. Get the damn planes down.
Up above, the Secret Service orders the White House staff to evacuate.
As soon as we were outside, Secret Service agents told us to run. And they kept yelling to run. And if you looked at their faces, they wanted us to run.
Everybody out! Everybody out!
One of them yelled, you know, women, take off your heels and run. Take off your heels and run. And so I did. I took them off and I started running as fast as I could. The gates opened and we all went pouring out.
Dozens of fighters are buzzing in the sky. F-16s scramble at Andrews Air Force Base in nearby Maryland.
We were told to get airborne and protect the Capitol.
I believe there's over 20 fighters, plus tankers, AWACS, you know, the other support airplanes. Total military in the area, I'd say it was probably 30-plus airplanes.
Well, it never in my wildest dreams occurred to me that one day I'd be orbiting over the Pentagon that had just been hit, looking for possible incoming aircraft.
In the